This episode of Stand Up and Holler is brought to you by Thrive Fantasy. Come prop up on Thrive Fantasy this football season. Thrive Fantasy is a daily fantasy sports and esports app for player props. With Thrive, you can eliminate the countless hours of research and focus on only the top tier athletes that have the biggest impact on the game. Choose 10 out of the 20 available player props to build your lineup. Each prop is assigned a fantasy value for both the over and the under based on how likely it is to hit. Hit the most props and rack up the most points to win a share of the prize pool. Use promo code REACT when you sign up today, and you'll receive a 100% instant first deposit match up to $100. Download Thrive Fantasy on the App Store or Play Store or by visiting their website, www.thrivefantasy.com. Sign up and prop today.
I'm Nick Knudsen, joined by Will Miles. Welcome to Stand Up and Holler, the early signing day edition. Look, the hashtag chosen few 22, it's been a little too on the nose for the last several months here. Billy Napier walks in the door. 5 minutes later, we have a lot of excitement to talk about from yesterday's early National Signing Day, Will, and I'm looking forward to jumping into it with you. But what was more exciting here? Was it more exciting to all the guys that are coming into Gainesville, obviously an exciting thing, or just watching FSU just be absolutely obliterated by Jackson State on National Signing Day in the biggest stage possible for them?
I mean, FSU kind of feels like Tennessee at this point where, they like on Twitter get a little bit excited every once in a while, and then we just sort of smack them back into place. So that's not really the thing that got me excited yesterday, though it was kind of funny to see their five-star recruit.
Two FCS losses in one season, Will.
Yeah, well, no one they can't talk about Georgia Southern anymore. That's for sure. But I'll tell you the thing that got me excited. The thing that got me excited, and this is going to be weird, but I wrote about it in my article today, which is that when I was recording Gators Breakdown with Gator Dave, and all of a sudden on Twitter, the announcement came that the offensive lineman Julian Armella out of St. Thomas Aquinas was going to announce his commit. And he had four hats on the table, and one of them was Florida. And I just assumed he was going to pick Florida. Now, he didn't pick Florida, and so obviously you're a little bit disappointed at that. But all of the events of the day led to me to basically go, Napier's got this. Like, we're good, right? And the perception of, or at least the way we felt about that over the last really decade at this point, where if you were going up against Kirby or going up against Saban, you pretty much knew you were going to lose when it came to recruiting, and that's not the case anymore. So it was cool to have that feeling again, because that was the feeling, I remember where I was hitting refresh on my computer while I was in grad school when Urban Meyer was bringing home Percy Harvin and Tim Tebow. And, this was in the early days of recruiting, but still they had sort of the live chat room updates when you were doing that. That's what this felt like. Like, you knew that when Urban Meyer went out there in 2006, 2007, and 2008, that the best players were coming to Florida. And it felt like that yesterday again, where, hey, we're not where we want to be for this class. We're not where we want to be overall. But in terms of what's being built is a program and a machine that's going to be able to provide that same type of thing to Florida, that same feeling to Florida fans again.
So some actual confidence on the recruiting trails. I believe what you're describing there. That's great. It is nice to have too, because I'll tell you what, we'll start with Kamari Wilson, which was the flip of the day. There were a couple of good ones, but Kamari Wilson was the headliner, not only because he's a five-star safety out of IMG, but IMG Academy, we've just had terrible success there. We've had no success there, not terrible success, no success. He was projected to go to LSU or Georgia. He had Florida State up there as one of his finalists as well. And Florida kind of entered back into the picture when Billy Napier hired Jamar Chaney. That had a big thing to do with it. We talked about on this week's Stand Up and Holler. From 24/7 Sports, Andrew Irvine, Wilson is a battering ram of a safety that likes contact. He transferred into national powerhouse that is IMG after a breakout sophomore campaign, and left as a 2-year starter in the secondary. 2-year starter at IMG, producing all types of talent there. Thrives in run support. but can also stick with most tight ends and running backs in coverage, at least the ones he saw on Friday nights. Quick to trigger, takes sharp, clean angles while in pursuit, knows how to get home on a blitz. It always seems to be making stops behind the line of scrimmage, tends to play faster than he tests, and gets downhill with a full head of steam. That's something you like to hear from your safety. We do have a lot of good young players in the secondary. Maybe Wilson's not going to be a guy that steps in 2022 and makes an immediate impact, but this type of player is who we've been lacking. Dan Mullen recruited 2 5-star recruits in his entire 4-year tenure at Florida. Billy Napier walks in the door, even tempers expectation, and then goes out and pulls a 5-star recruit from IMG Academy. Will, you have to be elated with this one.
You know, we've been talking about it for years that Florida needs to draw a circle around Gainesville and just widen that circle further and further and further. And any circle you draw in the state of Florida has to have IMG Academy included in it. And doubly so with a guy like Kamari Wilson, who's from Fort Pierce originally. And so It's not a guy who's from Pennsylvania who decided to come down and play at IMG Academy. This is a Florida kid who should want to play for Florida. You got Miami making a coaching change. You got Florida State doing whatever they're doing up there with Norvell. And so the timing is right for a guy who's organized to come in and really start to make inroads there at IMG. And, you know, the hope was always that Napier would be able to do that because he's been preaching relationships, because everybody seems to have liked him. But, you know, the reality is that Florida hasn't had any success, and that Florida really has had a pretty poor reputation with high school coaches around the state over the last couple of coaches. And so to start to turn that around at IMG, and let's be honest, Wilson's been playing with a bunch of guys at IMG who are all going to now come see him play in Gainesville. And so beyond just the fact that you've got one guy from IMG, you've got a guy who quite on social media today has been recruiting for Florida as well, been talking about, you know, coming back to the top, and he promises, you know, that we're going to get back on top and that sort of stuff. So he's already recruiting, I'm sure, some of his buddies from IMG, and certainly believes in Napier and what he's building. So, yeah, I mean, look, it doesn't get any bigger than flipping a 5-star, especially when you only have this limited amount of time. And I mean, he wasn't even in Wilson's top, in Wilson's, like, Florida wasn't even in the selection. And then all of a sudden an edit went up sometime last week where, oh, look, Florida got added. And I just sort of figured
it was a top 4 without Florida. And then all of a sudden Florida was that 5th school.
I was like, well, that's interesting, but history tells me, my PTSD from the last decade tells me that was really just to get me all riled up. And then you started to hear it was 50-50, but even then everybody that I knew was saying, hey, it's still going to be Georgia. And, you know, there just hasn't been enough time to build that relationship. And then boom, right. You got him coming and you're like, whoa, okay. And I mean, you know, we had been hearing about Shamar James and how he was basically not a lock, but, you know, very high percentage he was going to come there. You had Devin Moore, who'd already switched from Notre Dame to Florida there early in the morning. But the Wilson one, that was the thunderbolt, right? And that was the place where everybody started going, all right, now I'm starting to believe. And when there's a one-on-one battle, we're going to believe until we're proven differently that Napier's really going to have a shot and Florida's going to win some of those. So a cool feeling. And certainly Kamari Wilson is the headliner here, I'm sure.
Imagine what this guy is going to do with some time to recruit. This is what he's coming up with at the last minute. This is him going in the kitchen, looking at the ingredients and whipping up a 5-star meal, if you will, there.
Well, the good news is we have Georgia's recruiting board now, because he's now rating Georgia's recruiting department and bringing those folks down. Katie Turner was announced today. It sounds like there's going to be a couple, maybe at least one more, maybe 2 more from that Georgia recruiting department coming down to join Napier there at Florida. So, you know, the knives are out, and the rivalry is alive, and it's fun to see.
It's good. It's good to be having that rivalry. It's a year-round rivalry. Let's get competitive in the other parts of the year as well. Shamar James, you mentioned him, Will, 6'2", 212-pound, 4-star prospect, number 64 overall out of Faith Academy in Mobile, Alabama. He was a previous commit to the Gators last summer, decommitted as things started to fall apart in the fall. Again, you talk about going up against A&M, Auburn, Georgia, Bama, and he ends up choosing the Gators. Will, what were you hearing that made him change his mind or made him go back to Florida at this point? Good relationship with the staff early on. Some of the staff moves, I assume.
I mean, well, hey, we haven't had a linebackers coach, right? So I think the theme is that And like you said, it'll be interesting to see what Napier can do with a full staff and a full season. But I think the takeaway here is that Napier has been able to sell a vision. And that's what you hope you see in the first transition class, and what you hope you see in the bump class eventually, because you haven't gone on the field at all yet, right? There hasn't been any losing or any winning yet. And the elite of the elite, when it comes to recruiting, are able to sell their vision in a way that makes everybody buy in, makes really quality players buy in. James wanted to be a Gator, right? I mean, but then you get the uncertainty around the program. Mullen's under fire. Grantham's about to get let go. You might have a defensive coordinator come in for a year. And then if Mullen had gotten let go after 2022, you would have been sort of stuck with a staff you didn't pick. And, where do I transfer and that sort of stuff. Plus, that staff didn't play anybody when they were true freshmen. So you weren't going to get any playing time. And all of a sudden, now you've got somebody new coming in. I think what it really did was give James a fresh look at a place that he wanted to go anyway. And as long as he was willing to buy into Napier's vision, then it was good.
Do we need help at linebacker next year?
Maybe a little bit, especially with Diabate leaving, right? I mean, with Diabate leaving, that, or at least in the transfer portal, yes, we need a linebacker. And the big thing is you look at 6'2", 212, but he's fast. And so a guy who's fast at 6'2", 212, the thing I heard both in those previews, both with Wilson and James, is their ability to tackle. And you consider that Florida got gashed for 300 and something yards against LSU on a pretty simple counter play. I mean, a linebacker who can come downhill and blow up a guard is going to be a welcome addition. Now, again, I mean, guys who are ranked 64th in the country are guys who can come in and contribute. They aren't usually guys who come in and are stars day one. So, it's usually the guys who are ranked 10th, 12th, 15th who end up being the stars day one. So even with Wilson, it may take a little while to get him into the fold. I mean, sort of think like Kaiir Elam. It took him maybe, halfway through his true freshman year to really start making an impact. That's probably what we're seeing with Wilson and James, especially if you look back at Napier's Louisiana history and sort of the way he worked his guys that he had recruited in and used sort of the previous staff's guys to build what he was doing there. But, a big linebacker who can run and can tackle, I'm in.
212 pounds out of high school, meaning maybe 2 years from now, we're looking at a guy that's 230 pounds potentially.
Well, he was like 185 earlier this year, because that's what he was listed at on 3.
Yeah.
And so he's put on some muscle and put on some size.
He'll continue to grow. That's going to be a big linebacker in a couple of years. Who can
and again, this is somebody that that Nick Saban wanted, right? Out of Mobile, Alabama. So the first 2 guys on the list, the top 2 recruits, at least thus far, that Billy Napier's brought in. One of them is somebody Kirby Smart wanted. One of them is somebody Nick Saban wanted. So beyond just the fact that they've got these talented guys coming in, you hear people go, "Oh, it's about evaluation and not stars." Well, these guys were evaluated by the best of the best, and they wanted them, and Napier got them.
Well, speaking of not from Gator territory here, we got Chris Mcclellan coming in at the defensive line spot. The third and final top 100 player in Billy Napier's first early signing day class out of Owasso, Oklahoma, 6'3", 295 from Gabe Brooks at 24/7. He's a big framed interior defensive lineman who can fit varying roles in multiple fronts. Good height coupled with very good length, owns virtually a college-ready size, but wears mass well and can fit more bulk as required thanks to the long arm build he has. Ample snaps as a hands on the ground and standing edge and interior defender. So this is a guy who's athletic enough, Will, to really move across the line early on, it looks like, from his high school career. And, you're talking about almost 300 pounds, and you're describing that type of athlete at 6'3", 300 pounds nearly. This should be a guy that gets some snaps early in his career. Maybe not trying to predict anything for next year, but definitely, late freshman, early sophomore. By his sophomore year, he should be a contributor on this line.
Well, I mean, we'll see what Florida does in the transfer portal.
Yeah.
Because they're really light there at defensive tackle. You had the 3 transfers who came in this year who are all going to be gone. You obviously have Gravon Dexter there as well. Lamar Goods started to play a little bit there towards the end of the season. There were a few more guys who sort of got in. Desmond Watson obviously is sort of the Terrence Cody, if you want to make the Alabama connection when you're sort of comparing what might end up happening next year. And certainly if Watson gets in better shape and is able to sort of eat bodies up front, that'll be a big deal for Florida. But look, I mean, in the SEC, it's not like you need 4 guys in the defensive line. You need 12, and you need to be able to rotate him. You need to be able to keep him fresh. And so I expect McClellan gets to play a little bit early. This one, again, there was some nervousness about going out to Oklahoma. Nick Evers had committed to Oklahoma, and McClellan's pretty close with him. But obviously the pull of Napier. It is also interesting because this guy committed while I was on stage at the Gainesville Quarterback Club. Pat Dooley started asking me, how's a guy commit without knowing who the coach is? And I'm sitting there going, pretty sure he knows who the coach is there, buddy.
I think his quote,
I think they might have told him
when they asked him about it. He said, I know the Gators aren't going to hire a slouch. He said something along those lines. Yeah, he definitely knew. He definitely knew. But that's a good memory to have for Gator fans, is that, hey, this guy committed 2 days after Dan Mullen got fired, or so you just remember that when you think of a guy who wants to be a Gator.
No kidding, man. Especially a guy from Oklahoma, right? You sit there and go, it again, I think it says something about the program. It says something about Napier being able to hold him, being the guy he wants to come play with. But it's exciting. 3 top 100 guys, and that's always the concern in the transition classes. Are you going to get that high level talent? Because you can sort of fill out in the 200s and the 300s and the 400s. Still some of those guys left. There pretty much aren't any 5-stars left. I mean, if they didn't get Jamari Wilson, they weren't going to get another 5-star this cycle. And, like 75% of those guys are signed and like 95% of them are committed. So the idea that Napier's going to go out and get another guy who's a 5-star talent who fits what he wants to do and is willing to send him his film and all that sort of stuff, not very likely. And so these are probably going to be the 3 best recruits who come in this cycle. And I'm excited to have these 3 guys for 2 reasons. One, I think they fit what Napier wants. I think they definitely want to be Gators. And then the other aspect of it is that they're all on the defense. And if you were to pinpoint where Florida's gone wrong over the last couple of years, it's been defense and toughness and speed and trying to play with tweeners, a guy who's like a corner and a safety, or a guy who's a safety and a linebacker, or a guy who's a corner in the star. The hope is a guy like Shamar James is going to be a 3-down linebacker. The hope is a guy like Chris Mcclellan is going to be somebody who eats up space on the inside, 3 downs, and is able to pass rush on 3rd down. And then the hope is a guy like Jamari Wilson is going to be a 3-down safety who can come up and run support, but also play in coverage if you need him to.
So that's 3 top 100 players within 2 weeks for Billy Napier. How many top 100 players do we have on the day Dan Mullen was fired?
I have no idea. I know last year's class had 3 total. We had 0 top 100. Wow.
Yeah. When Mullen was canned, right? These 3 guys.
That's right. There were a couple of guys who were top 100 who had decommitted before Mullen got fired.
Like James had decommitted. Yeah, we had 0 top 100 the day Mullen's fired. Napier pulls in 3 of the top 100 players on 2 weeks worth of recruiting. Unbelievable job to start by Billy Napier. Devin Moore, another big name in-state out of Naples High School, a safety, 6'3", 190, just a long, athletic dude. If you look at his film, makes a lot of plays. Seems like he's pretty good with the ball, too. He seems to be a little bit of a ball hawk from what I can see. Originally committed to Notre Dame in July, announced his decommitment at the end of November and commits to the University of Florida. Number 121 safety overall, number 28 recruit in Florida. I'm fired up about this one, Will, but this might be a guy that takes a couple years to see the field as a solid contributor, down in, down out, just because of the talent at that position. But again, you see, I didn't bring it up with the Jamari Wilson commit because I was saving it for this one, but 2 big-time 4-star, 5-star kids to come in and play the defensive backfield. I don't think that's an accident with the hire of Corey Raymond, because that was a big reason too. It was another factor in Wilson that mentions that, hey, Raymond's the guy that committed that recruited me to LSU as well. So Raymond probably has established relationships with these guys as well. Patrick Toney, Raymond, Napier, getting it done on the defensive side of the ball early on.
And you add them to guys like Jason Marshall, Kyer Elam, Jaden Hill, Avery Helm, Rashad Torrance, all those guys who are already there. And this is something that I think, when I was sort of making the case before everything fell apart against South Carolina and Missouri, when I was making the case that Mullen deserved another year, the reason is that entire defense was basically the 2020 recruiting class. The 2019 recruiting class was a real dud. Now that's part of why Mullen doesn't have a job anymore is that bump 2019 class was a dud, and that was the problem. But the 2020 class has a lot of guys who started a lot of games. And so adding these guys, like, you think about sort of the way Ron Zook left the cupboard pretty full when he left for Urban Meyer. It's not the same thing. I mean, Zook was bringing in 5-star guys all over the place when he was the head coach of Florida. But I do think from the standpoint of guys who are ready to play and have experience and will have learned from their mistakes. And then you bring in a staff with Patrick Toney and Corey Raymond and Jamar Chaney, and you're able to sort of integrate these guys in. I think there's an opportunity for them to get playing time, but an opportunity to really raise the level of competition in each of those rooms. And if a guy like Rashad Torrance goes down, there's going to be someone who can step in to that role. And obviously you don't hope for anybody to get injured, but this is ACC, people get injured. And so at the end of the day, even if their freshman year, these guys are depth pieces, or if they redshirt, it's still competition in the room that's going to raise the level of play for everybody in there.
Couple other notable signings here: 2 4-star players. Honey Livingston is a tackle and a tight end. It looks like he's going to play some tight end from King High School. 6'4", 260, solid athlete. Looks like he can be versatile, and they can use him however they need to. Jamari Lions, 4-star defensive lineman out of Vieira High School in Melbourne. Another solid product along the defensive line, 4-star, 6'4", 295. 3-star offensive linemen, Christian Williams, Jalen Farmer, David Connor, all signing yesterday as well. A lot of bulk there: 6'4", 320, 6'5", 325, and 6'6", 270. So lots of bulk there to work with. And then, of course, Trey Smack, the 3-star kicker. Don't see a lot of 3-star kickers. That's pretty impressive. So Trey Smack coming in. Looking forward to a lot of announcers saying smack when he kicks the ball. That's going to probably happen quite a bit in the future. But all these moves we talked about here. So that's your signing class right now as it stands at 10 commits for the Gators. Working on bringing more in. Obviously, it's a couple of these guys hopefully delaying their decision. Some of those IMG guys that were committed to Clemson are out there. There's still some targets out there that Billy Napier can add to this class, and we haven't even begun to talk about the transfer portal. Lots of guys, and I think there's over 1,000 players in the transfer portal right now. We've seen some of them land in different spots over the years, but over the last few weeks here. But lots of chances to completely rebuild this roster almost in year one of Billy Napier. It'll be interesting to see. But which of these moves has you the most excited, and why?
So there's a couple things. One is that if you actually look at the class as a whole, look at who they picked up. They picked up 2 safeties, a linebacker, and a defensive lineman, and then actually 2 defensive linemen in the 4- and 5-star realm. And then they've got some depth offensive linemen. You think of Christian Williams and you think of Jalen Farmer. Those are probably depth offensive linemen. David Connor's a guy who's probably got some upside. So you look at it, and where did Napier say when he came in that he was going to focus? He was going to focus in the trenches, offensive and defensive line. Where did he focus in this first 10 guys that he's bringing in? Offensive and defensive line. And then he brought some elite talent at linebacker and safety in. So that's the first thing. And then the thing that really gets me excited is Devin Moore, which seems weird to say the guy who's ranked 252nd is the one who gets me the most excited. But the reason he gets me the most excited is he knew Kamari Wilson was coming, and he's a safety. And he said, I still want to come. And granted, maybe we'll have a free safety and a strong safety combination of Wilson and Moore back there. But when you play the same position as a guy who's coming from IMG, going to have the hype of Wilson and the skills and abilities of Wilson, and you still say, hey, I want to be in that room because I want to compete. That's the kind of stuff you get for Alabama, right? You get a guy like Mac Jones or any of the 5-star guys who go in there and they go, look, if I win the job at Alabama, I'm good enough to play in the pros. And if I don't win the job at Alabama, I'm probably not good enough to play in the pros. And so it's a measuring stick, and you want people who are competitors who are going to come in and want to play against the best. And so that's why I think Devin Moore's the most exciting to me, because it's a guy who plays safety, who is not only okay with, but wants to buy into the program with another high-level safety and come in and make a difference and compete. And so, we heard a lot about compete from the previous administration, and then they went out and gave up 40 points against South Carolina. Again, nothing's been on the field yet, but when you think about the personalities, when Napier's talking about doing evaluations and really evaluating the players and making sure it's a fit, right, that the player likes Florida and that Napier likes the player, this makes me start to think about, okay, well, maybe maybe that fit, this is somebody who sort of fits the personality of being a football junkie and the kind of guy that Napier's going to want to bring in. So I'll ask you the same question, Nick. I mean, what about you? Like, what's the thing that you look at and go, this is the thing that I take away from the early signing day that makes me confident or gives me pause to think that, the Napier era is heading in the right direction.
I alluded to it earlier with my comment, but 3 top 100 players in 2 weeks. Are you kidding me, dude? Are you kidding me? After lowering expectations in your opening press conference, I think if you could do that kind of damage in 2 weeks, what can you do with an entire year? I cannot wait. Will Miles been talking about the bump class, right? That second class is what's going to make or break you. And you talk about, what did you want to try to get out of this class? Couple of all conference performers, but this is not the make or break time. I think you have that potential with the Kamari Wilson coming in and really so many things around the Wilson recruitment. The fact that we seemingly were off his board, somehow found our way back on. And then the IMG thing, which has baffled us for years. That's a big deal. That is a big deal that we got our foot in the door with that program finally. It's been a big question why it's happening, what's going on with it. And Will, it's just been something. I live down the road. I'm probably about an hour away from IMG, but IMG is about an hour away from where I live in the Tampa area. And it's crazy to me that Florida just does not get any prospects out of that school. So the fact that he went in there, got that done. Unbelievable job with just a short amount of time. And if he could do that with that amount of time, what can he do with more time?
So are you trying to tell me that Nick Knudsen wants to be an analyst who specifically recruits from the IMG Academy? Is this what I'm hearing?
Give me a call. My phone number is out there. Just
there's like 75 assistants at this or analysts at this point. He wasn't kidding when he said he was going to build an army.
I'll be the assistant to that. We'll be the Dwight Schrute position. Just call us assistant to something, and then we'll just say we aren't the assistant to, and then the assistant to the analyst. We'll just. I
got to be honest, man. It's interesting how COVID sort of put all this in motion, because you have the COVID stuff that sort of started the criticism of Dan Mullen back in 2020, and then the COVID started to open up the Zoom calls, and then you got Gator Dave asking Mullen some questions that didn't go over so well, and all of a sudden now you got Katie Turner sort of trolling that a little bit tonight on Twitter, talking about how there is no recruiting off season, and Napier going and swiping assistants and recruiting assistants, people who you go look on her Twitter page with some of the parents and the people who have the parents of the commits who've reached out to her and said some stuff on Twitter, and she clearly has a impact on the Georgia program in terms of connecting with the parents who are the parents of the recruits and the recruits specifically. So, look, still a lot of work to do, but it's an exciting time. And the fact that Florida has decided that it's going to say, we're going after Georgia, that's fun, right? Yeah. If nothing else, this is going to be fun, because we're going to get, maybe you can't scale that mountain. Maybe things aren't good enough, but we aren't going to slink off and just get our butt whipped. Like, we're coming after you, and you're going to have to defend your territory. And that's fun.
All right. Well, one other thing, we're looking at this first class here, taking it in. It's only early signing day, only 10 commits. You got to think there's probably going to be another, at least 5 to 10 high school kids, and then maybe another 5. What are we looking at? What do you think the balance between transfer portal and high school kids is going to be for the remainder of the class?
I think he's going to go heavy transfer portal, to be honest with you. I think when you look at what Florida's going to lose in the transfer portal, the NCAA passed legislation this year that allows you to replace 7 guys who transfer without any penalty on the initial counter list, right? So you don't have to count the guys back to a previous class. You don't have to do any of that stuff. So if you've got Diabate leaving, if you got Bogle leaving, if you got Emory Jones leaving, those are people you can replace. And there are so many guys who are like redshirt freshmen and sophomores in the transfer portal at this point that you can get. So like Emory Jones transfers out, you only had 1 year of eligibility left. You can bring in a guy who's got 3 years of eligibility if you're playing your cards right and you have a need, and that person meshes well with the staff. The reality is that the free agency stuff that Lane Kiffin and other guys and Debo Swinney have been talking about is real, from the standpoint of the one-time transfer gives players options. You're no longer just bringing in a grad transfer. transfer, right? The transfer portal is different these days. And so I think he'll probably go pretty heavy there. And I mean, what does that look like? 7 guys, that's a pretty big haul from the transfer portal. And now you're starting to try to figure out how you're going to manage scholarships. So you're not going to sign a bunch of fluff on the back end just to sort of build depth if you need to save those scholarships for guys you're going to bring in from the transfer portal. So what I suspect is that there's going to be that the guys who are going to be brought in are probably going to be more offensive and defensive linemen, right? It's going to be depth type pieces up front, especially guys who are in like that 400 to 700 range. That's kind of, it's wise, I think, to target offensive and defensive linemen there. If there's an opportunity to go after somebody big, hardcore, I think you do that. But then you take a big look, because the reality is that most programs are going to have scholarship issues in terms of replacing these guys. So you might even have an advantage if you've got a smaller class. You might be able to absorb more transfers, depending upon the way things work. So, I think he's going to hit the transfer portal pretty heavy. I think the 2020 class is going to really sort of give him a foundation. I mean, Anthony Richardson's a part of that. I think the big thing is they're probably going to look to bring in a quarterback through the transfer portal as well. Not necessarily to start, but they're going to bring in a quarterback because Anthony Richardson's been injury prone, and because if Anthony Richardson is not injury prone, you've only got one more year of Anthony Richardson. And so, that's what I'm sort of anticipating, is that the transfer portal likely is going to be the path that Napier decides to take. But, again, he is a believer in a process, and he may decide that for the long-term health of the program, he wants to emphasize on high school players. I don't think that makes sense when you've got guys with 2 and 3 years of eligibility left. I think it makes sense, especially with the 7 player. If he wants to sign more than 7 transfers, then I'd be surprised. But I think the transfer portal is a game changer in many different ways. Just like the NIL is a game changer in a lot of different ways. Florida just announced today they're partnering with people to be able to allow direct connections between boosters and companies and things like that with their players. So clearly that was something, I'm sure, that was communicated to players when they came in. Not necessarily, hey, a pay for play, but this is going to be an opportunity that's available. Florida is going to be contracting with people who give you the ability to go out and do name, image, and likeness stuff. So it's an exciting time to be a Gator fan, man. I'll be honest. I didn't see IMG coming. Definitely not this quickly. So Napier's already exceeded expectations. So predicting what he's going to do next is a little bit hard, because, I wouldn't have said spending time at IMG is a wise way to spend time when you only got 10 days. But it turns out when Jamari Wilson comes your way, it's a wise way to spend some time.
Let's go take back other parts of the state too. We saw a 5-star kid get out of here, went to A&M from Lakeland this past year. Jacksonville was down there in the Dan Mullen era. Let's see them get back into Jacksonville. A lot of great players coming out of Duval County and St. Johns County up there. Billy Napier off to a blazing start early on. 3 top 100 players in his first 2 weeks on the job. That's the type of hire you made, because that's exactly why you made this hire. It's exactly why you made this hire. And Billy Napier is doing what he was brought in to do. Let's keep the momentum going. Let's see what comes around into February. In the meantime, we got a bowl game coming up next week. The Gasparilla Bowl will be back. We'll be back early next week with a preview for the Gasparilla Bowl against UCF. Thanks for tuning in to this special early signing day edition of Stand Up and Holler, and have a great weekend. Thank you for watching this episode of Stand Up and Holler. Be sure to subscribe to the Read and Reaction YouTube channel, join our Patreon community at Read and Reaction for bonus content each week, and check out our website at readandreaction.com. I'm Nick Knudsen, joined by Will Miles, and as always, go Gators.